Now by former Illinois Republican Governor Jim Edgar. He left office with approval ratings still positive. That's something that's hard to do if you're running for, if you hold that office of governor. And Governor Edgar, always good to have you with us. What are your first impressions of tonight's results?
Well, I don't think there was a surprise based off what recent polls have shown. I think it underscores that Senator Bailey did a good job of campaigning in the primary. He identified who are primary voters, and primary voters usually are more conservative than general election voters in the Republican primary, and he went after those, and I think did a good job campaigning. He got big help from Governor Pritzker. I mean, the $35 million or more that the governor spent trying to defeat Richard Irvin, I think paid off for him to get who he wanted to run against in Senator Bailey. I think that it did demonstrate that in Republican primaries today in Illinois, we've definitely seen a shift to the right. Now, the only trouble with that, if you're worried about winning elections, is we have not seen a shift in Illinois to the right. If anything, we've seen a shift in the last few years to the left. So that's going to make it extremely, I think, challenging for Senator Bailey in the upcoming general election. But as we know, anything's possible in politics, and this should be nationwide a good Republican year. So he'll have that going for him. But I think he's still going to go into this election the underdog. And I think some of his rhetoric in the past, I think, will not help him in the general election.
I'm hearing that Richard Irvin might be addressing some of his supporters. Governor Edgar, if you can stay on with us, I'm going to see if we can listen in to Richard Irvin right now. He's taking the stage alongside his running mate, Avery Bourne. Let's listen to Richard Irvin. Actually, it looks like he may have just stepped off the mic. Is that? Okay, he just stepped off the mic, so we got a shot of him pumping his fist in the air, sort of giving his supporters that word. We don't even know if he'll finish in second place. It may be that Jesse Sullivan overtakes him in the final vote count, but either way, second or third, it may be immaterial. Governor Edgar, is this still your party?
Well, you look at Jesse Sullivan has run much better than I think a lot of people thought. I think he benefited. He didn't have the two sides beating on him like Irvin had and to some extent Bailey had. But the party's changed, there's no doubt. It's much different, at least primary. Now, I don't think necessarily it means that the far right has taken over the Republican Party unless they can translate that into victories in November. If they're not successful in winning these offices, I think then we'll go to the next 4-year primary and see what point of view prevails in the Republican primary. So, I'm not ready to say I'm no longer a Republican. I will say that I am probably one of the more moderate Republicans that's left in the party. But only time will tell whether this is a permanent shift in the party. There's no doubt going into this election, this will be far the most conservative slate of candidates we've ever put up for a general election in Illinois.
I want to ask you for your analysis on where exactly the Irvin campaign went wrong. But first, I want to mention, I think that voters, especially in this hypersensitive information age where everything is at the tip of your fingers, you can see videos, you can see tweets, you can see posts on Facebook right away. Voters really want authenticity. And in this race, the Irvin campaign hammered Darren Bailey, trying to suggest that really he supported Barack Obama, he was some sort of a closeted liberal, and he was trying to sort of toy with Darren Bailey's conservative credentials. Looking back now, was that a flawed strategy?
He's done a superb job as mayor, and he has a great story. I think, unfortunately, their campaign strategy, they didn't push that. They, as you said, I think it was absurd to imply that Bailey was some left-winger. I think they could have gone after him on some of his votes against budgets and things like that, and his electability. I do think that their targeting was a mistake. Now, when you lose, everything you did is a mistake. If you win, everything you did was right. So there's going to be a lot of criticism toward the Bailey campaign, but I mean the Irving campaign. But I do think they pushed the wrong message. They should have talked about the candidate, about what he's achieved, and also point out some of the differences and some of the problems that Bailey's record would have in a general election. I think they wasted a lot of time and effort on the wrong message. Now, saying that, I also think if Governor Pritzker hadn't poured $35 million into the race to defeat him, it could have been a different result in the end. But nobody knew any of these candidates, and I think the candidates should have spent more time identifying who they are. I think they all had some good stories. I think, especially the mayor, I think had a great story. I just don't think people got that story. And what a lot of people got is what the Pritzker's commercials said about him, and they were terrible. I mean, my wife, she came away saying, he's a terrible person. I've listened to all these commercials. I said, you can't believe those commercials. You know, they're coming from the Democrats.
Well, I won't ask you. I won't ask you who Mrs. Edgar voted for.
I do think if I was making suggestions to him, and I made a few, that I think they pushed the wrong issues, and they should have talked more about him as a person.
Very interesting. There was a lot of attention on you backed former Governor Bruce Rauner before he was governor in that primary. Then you wouldn't back him again in 2018 after seeing that budget battle meltdown and just everything that happened while he was in the office. Going into 2022, are you open-minded to backing Darren Bailey for governor?
Well, I reluctantly supported Bruce Rauner when he ran the first time. I wasn't for him in the primary. I was for my former chief of staff, who he narrowly defeated. And I had hoped that, some of his rhetoric, maybe he would change a little bit. He had been a businessman and all, but I was extremely disappointed with the way he dealt with budget issues, which to me is the most important thing that a governor has to do. I mean, the governor has to manage the state, and I think that was a mistake. So I don't, at this point, plan on endorsing anybody. I'm trying to back out of that a little bit, but one of the criteria I would use, who do I think could do the best job fiscally running the state? And I have to say that Governor Pritzker took over a pretty bad situation and has done a pretty decent job on the budget. Now, he's got some help from the federal government, and I am concerned about Senator Bailey and some of his associates in the Eastern Bloc always voting no on anything having spending money. You just can't spend no on all budget issues and run the state. So I'll listen to what happens during the campaign, but I at this point don't plan to endorse either side at this point.
Very interesting. You're listening now to Jim Edgar joining us as he gives us insight and analysis into some of the biggest news of the night, that Darren Bailey, the downstate farmer from Louisville who started a private Christian school, becoming the Illinois Republican Party nominee to run for governor. Governor, what do you make of, you handled a lot of issues. You were there in the 90s looking over a lot of politics. What do you make of this? Can we call it a fixation on matters of race and gender in Republican Party campaigning about what goes on in classrooms? What's the strategy there, do you think? Is it effective?
Well, I think it's effective in the primary, as we've seen. I don't think it's that effective in a general election. Some might say, well, it worked in Virginia to some extent. But he was very careful to not get too close to former President Trump, which is another issue within the Republican Party. I still think voters want to know about the candidate as a person. They want to know about the character. They do want a person that'll keep his word. And I do think Senator Bailey did a good job. I mean, he is who he is. I don't think he's tried to be somebody he's not, and I applaud him for that. But I do think that his approach to government, I don't think it might play in Missouri. Probably would. I'm not sure it's going to play in Illinois. We're a much different state. much more cosmopolitan. We have a lot of issues that you've got to find common ground. When I was governor, I was a downstater, but I was governor for the entire state. And I made a point not to sound anti-Chicago. And I made a point to try to find common ground with the Democratic legislature that I had to deal with. So compromise is very important if you're going to be effective as a governor. That's something I think that we have not seen that approach from Senator Bailey. And I think that's going to be something that we're going to have to see if he's going to convince a lot of independents and some thoughtful Democrats, which you always have to have if you're a Republican, to win in Illinois.
Governor Jim Edgar, I have to say, I know you haven't held the governor's mansion for some time now, but we still see a politician know how to drop that regional reference saying that Darren Bailey might play in Missouri. He knows his audience, folks. Jim Edgar, thank you for joining us. We appreciate your insight and analysis. Again, a governor who left Illinois and its budget in better shape than when he inherited it, and approval ratings also pointing north. It's been some time since Illinois saw a Republican like that in the governor's mansion. Darren Bailey just yesterday saying it's been a long time since there's been a conservative Republican. He draws a distinction from him and governors in recent past like Bruce Rauner or Jim Edgar or George Ryan.